G'day everybody, how you going tonight? It is so good to see you. I do hope you are super well. We're here today to talk about this very exciting new lens from Laowa. It is a 10mm f2.8 and it is part of their 0D universe. And what that means in Laowa speak is zero distortion. And what is even more exciting about this lens is that it's fully electronic. We have full autofocus, aperture and EXIF data coming through. And tonight we are shooting on the Z8 firmware 2.0 with the 50mm 1.2, along with the hobo light here running at just 5% to try and keep me balanced with the city here. The sun has set about half an hour ago. How do you think the hobo light looks? Let's get into the 10mm fully AF 0D. Love it. Sensor is only 1 foot away from my face, but this allows us to see what the background out of focus looks like. It looks really soft and nice from my perspective, that we can actually get some background out of focus showing some actual depth of field with a 10mm lens. Shooting 8K 1/25 f2.8 ISO 6400 with the 0D Federation Square. Is very wide and it's for tight interiors or tight cityscapes, landscapes. We are getting a lot of vertical information here, 50-story buildings, and we're getting them no problem in frame, and we're not far away, probably 200 meters, 300 meters. Yeah, very impressive. And stabilization on the Z8, terrific. I would expect this, if not better, on a ZF. Just to give you an idea of how silly wide this is. Z8 Laowa full frame 10mm f2.8 C&D Dreamer. I like these flares. This is pretty harsh in the corner, and I would say, considering we're at 200%, that the suppression of chromatic aberration is pretty good. This is a pretty minor and interestingly not overly purple. That's quite interesting to me. A bit more pronounced there, but easy to remove. And this helps a little bit, the fringing tool. I think it makes a bit of a difference. I think all of that's being handled really well. Another example of that flare. Federation Square, you would have seen the video image of this. Now this is 1/3 of a second handheld 640 ISO f2.8. At 100%, we can see that that is sharp. If we go in and try and find these bolts here, they're looking great. We're at 200% with an ultra wide angle lens handheld 1/3 of a second at night. Result. Perhaps my favorite image of the night. This is a roof, but this lens is so wide it makes it look like the cosmos. I just love how this looks. We're 640 ISO 1/5 f2.8. That's 100%. Pretty minimal adjustments. National Gallery of Victoria. And a quick way to try and minimize these signs here on the side. Obviously you could remove them in Photoshop. You could just darken them, and that makes them way less important, gets you pretty close to the desired result. Now it has impacted the rest of the image a bit more than I want to, like this foreground on the tiles here. I like that journey. So another way to do that, and Capture One will do this, other software will do this, is you very quickly, you just mask. And make it nice and feathered, which is what the inner outer circle means, big feathering. Turn the mask to invisible, and then we can just darken that area, not impacting the rest of the image. If we mix that with a little bit of vignetting, a pretty good result. Although I actually like seeing a bit of it, I think. I like it hiding in the shadows there. So what we might do is just bring that back before, after. Very wide scene, and the 10mm is the only sort of lens that can capture this. And the reason being is that they've placed this thing here so you can't get too far back. And you can get a sense of the scale there with this person here. The lens is just so wide. It's so useful. I do quite like this shot. Minimal adjustments, ISO 200, 13th of a second, 2.8. Bit bright. Let's drop it down to 1600. So we are 1/25, 2.8. 1600 handheld on the Z8. Yeah, I like this. 15 elements in 9 groups, 5 aperture blades. Minimum focus distance is 12 centimeters. Now, I think I probably tested it down to something like 30 centimeters. That means that background can get even more out of focus. That's very cool. Autofocus, of course, it's a 77mm filter thread, and it weighs about 450 grams. And it comes in Sony E, Nikon Z, Canon RF, and also coming for Panasonic L mount. They almost match, not quite, close. And this is, I'm trying to get everything to kind of be kind of burnt. I'm liking the look, the kind of anywhere between yellow, orange, rust, going off. ZF Sunset Orange. As Bobby Tonelli. Bobby, how are you? Shout out to you. It is Hermes. Right there, that's the Hermes edition. He's so right. I love the industrial design of this lens. It's very minimalistic. That focus, that has just got exactly the right amount of resistance. That is really nice. Not sure how often you'd use it, but it's there, and it's got these 2 little dips, 180 degrees opposite each other, that you can just get a little finger stuck in. This really feels very premium, and we have a single switch, autofocus and manual focus, and that's it. That is all you're going to get with this lens. Really love the build quality of this lens. And then let's just take a quick look. Now, there's no USB-C port for firmware updates. Does that mean this is a very narrow laneway? It's only like 15 feet, maybe 5 meters wide. It looks wider because this lens is so wide. We do have that 130 degrees field of view. It's a lot. And I think we can see the most minor amount of distortion, just a tiny bit. But this lens is uncorrected to the best of my understanding. So we can do a minor amount of correcting if we feel we need to. Love this shot. Let me know which is your favorite. I'm looking really hard at this image to actually see clear distortion. There really isn't any. If we get this tool here to just have a look along this line, there might be the most minor amount, but it's very minor. This staircase is at right angles to this street, and it looks really good. Very hard to see. This is an enormous 32-inch screen that I'm looking at, and really, there's not much to look at. Getting into some of the grungy, grimy night spots, back alleys of Melbourne, and I love this sort of scene. You can capture the whole kind of mood and moment and what people are doing here. That purple color is lighting, but I feel like the lens is controlling all the different light sources and everything that's going on really well. I've pushed the shadows and pushed the highlights. Let's bring it back to closer to original. I just think that looks great. Now, if we're interested in looking at sharpness, here we are at 1/4 of a second handheld. But that's 100%, and I think there is a good amount of detail there. We can make it look a little bit sharper than it is. But for 1/4 of a second in a dark city, handheld, nice. 1/10 of a second here at a local church. 640 ISO. I feel like if you're traveling and you're shooting monuments at night, 640 ISO, 1/10 of a second, f2.8. It's a really strong result. Here is the center part of the lens. Focus is around here, and I like the rendition. I like the way it's handling the color. It's looking very realistic, and I do think sharp enough. We're actually at 100%, and as you can see, the center part of this lens doesn't appear to be distorted at all. It looks great. That's actually the full view. We have to consider what's going on here. It's 10mm. It doesn't come at the same sort of price point. It's quite bright, it's quite small, and it's quite light for what it's achieving. And when a lens is capturing a 130-degree view of the world, it is actually really dragging the edges around. So to maintain detail, I mean, if we have a look down here, this detail is being maintained even so we can see that distortion. And it's not distortion in the sense of things are overly bent, but this is what's required. You have to do this to reality in order to get 130 degrees into the frame. It's just optically what happens. At 100%, the relative sharpness, it is fantastic on this 4K screen at 32 inches. Fed square, 125 2.8 ISO 3200 handheld Z8. Very stable and looking very good. We are seeing clouds and the square is looking fantastic. I have to say the stabilization, because we're getting EXIF data, the camera knows exactly what's going on, which of course we can manually dial in, and with the new 2.0 and Z9, I think firmware 4 or 4.1, that finer grain control came. We're catching a little flare up there in that light. It's looking like eyelashes. I'm actually really liking how that looks. I don't think it's problematic at all. There's also the other side of that flare in the bottom right. You can see it over the closest umbrella, closed umbrella. And to get this shot horizontally is crazy, considering how tall that thing is. Now, there's no USB-C port for firmware updates. Does that mean this is like fully approved, or does this mean that Laowa think there is never need for a firmware update? Or does this mean that they've organized firmware updates to go through the bodies like Nikon do it? That's intriguing to me, and it does say to me somewhat that these might be official. Very interesting. Okay, now we're in a tight laneway that is no more than 15 feet wide. 5 meters, something like that. 125 2.8 ISO 800. Let's go to 16. Let's go to 32. Get a bit more of that color popping. And this is where a lens like this is very useful. And loving this sort of vibe with the Laowa 10mm 125 2.8, and we can get this beautiful 90 degrees differential. And it feels pretty natural. As we can see, we're at 10mm 1/8000th of a second, f2.8. We're shooting on the ZF. Fabulous for capturing things like this, where this chair is basically directly below this crazy Ferris wheel, but you can still get the shot in one frame and be standing right next to it. And I just love what's achievable here. The sun is directly behind the Ferris wheel, right there. You can see it popping through, and at 200% we are seeing the most minor amount of purple fringing, but that's 200%. Let's go to 100%. In reality, there is pretty much nothing to see here. At 100%, the sun is right here, and if there's purple fringing, it's almost impossible to see. If we go to 200%, we can just make out a tiny amount. This is nothing to worry about. At f8, 1/640th on the ZF, 200%. I like the way the lens deals with the sun. It is very smooth. It is very creamy. It's interesting. It's a good result. And is there flare? Can't see any flare. Luna Park, famous Melbourne icon, 10mm. Now we do have an example of flare here. We can see it right there at 100%. Very minor. Otherwise, that is directly looking into the sun, and I love the way that that is handled wide open. F22, if you like Sunstars, that's what they look like. Looking straight into the sun at the top of frame, we can see some flare at the bottom of frame. Another chance to look at sharpness, 100%. This is all looking rendered very, very nicely. Let's just keep in mind we are at 2.8, so fall off is going to happen. I do think the lens is sharpest in the center, and we can see that here, that it is very sharp at 100%. And I do think it gently starts to fall off as we head to the edges. Now, the quickest way to mitigate this issue would be to stop down 1 or 2 stops. Color rendition is great. There is no obvious signs of distortion with this lens, and this lens would not be corrected. Interestingly, this is the sun not more in the middle of frame, but on the edge of frame, and creating all sorts of exciting colors and rainbows and flare. I mean, that is a lot of flare. There's flare everywhere. And if I just step to the right, the flare is gone, and we can see the color and the rendition looks fantastic. Very sharp, very bright, very clean. Under the Bolty Bridge, like this shot, f7.1, 1/250th. We're probably getting some distortion here at the top, but that's still quite a lot of detail considering the differential between here, which is probably somewhere in the vicinity of, I would guess 200 meters away, 1 to 200 meters away, which is a significant amount. That's like 200 to 400 feet away. Very nice. And lines are looking pretty straight. Handheld. Looking at the pylon on the left and this supporting structure here on the right, verticals are looking very good. We've seen the performance of the lens in the field, at night, alleyways, shooting churches, cityscapes. This lens performs. I'm very happy with the quality of the lens. I'm very happy at the levels of distortion. There does appear to be the slightest amount of distortion with straight lines. To the best of my understanding, I don't believe Capture One, which is my software of choice, knows anything about this lens. So this is what this lens is doing optically. Totally minor amount of potential correction required. Quite frankly, it's so minimal for many types of photography, I don't even think it would be necessary. Unless you were doing architectural, then you might do a tiny amount of correction. At the time of recording this, Laowa hadn't provided me with a price yet. Here's the price. Laowa, of the third-party brands, does seem to be a bit of a premium brand. I've used some of their wide lenses before they had AF and before the industrial design was this good. I think this will be worth every cent. Now, when we look in the Nikon Z range of lenses, we've got the 14 to 30 f4, and we've got the 14 to 24 2.8 in full frame lenses, and they're the widest. The widest prime currently is a 20mm 1.8. So this is a really good option. I'd love to know what you think. Let me know in the comments below. Is this your type of lens? Is this something you could get excited about? I'm excited about it. Not only does it look super duper cool, but it does what it says on the box. And that's pretty awesome. Let me know in the comments below. It's been so good to see you, and if this is your first time here, I would love to see you again, so please do subscribe, please share, and please like. All right, bye for now. I love this installation. We've got the waterfall, the water wall, and then this fire. We're going to drop down to an 800, and just that's stunning. Dark back alley, 125 f2.8. Let's go to 3200 ISO on the Laowa 10mm. Great color, great textures. It's a Tuesday night, sort of quiet, sort of busy. Like 12 feet in height. It's pretty ridiculous. I really am falling for this lens. It's quite special. And here are my new wheels of fury. This thing absolutely